So this is going to be a little bit different than some of my other videos, but we're going to be talking about the book Disseverment. I found this book because this past October, Natalie from the Weirdo Book Club recommended a whole bunch of spooky horror reads, and Disseverment was the last one on her list. There's a ton of hidden gems in that list and other things I want to get to, but Disseverment piqued my interest specifically because she said, "Disgusting. Read at your own risk. Disgusting. I don't even know if I like this book or want to recommend it." And I was hooked. It was on Kindle Unlimited. I downloaded it right then and there. And oh my god, did Disseverment deliver. It is 62 pages of unhinged. And I need to talk about it with someone, so here we are. But first, before we dive into it, all of the spoilers coming up. So if you have any interest at all in Disseverment, please read it before you come with me on this conversation. And second, if you don't know whether or not you want to read Disseverment, do look up content warnings because all the content warnings apply. This is an extreme horror, it's intense, it goes there. It's got eating disorders, it has self-harm, it has torture, it has extreme body horror, it has assault, it has death of a parent. It has cheating. I feel like it has other things that I can't even remember off the top of my head, but you should go look at it and see if it's for you. Alright, so if you're still watching, let's jump into the summary. We've got an adult man going to see his estranged mother because his apparently new stepfather has written him a letter stating that she's dying and wants to see him before the end. So based off of this summary, I was personally expecting us to go through his childhood trauma, which, you know, he does actually reveal for the first time to his fiancée when the letter comes in. And I was expecting there to be an eating disorder and for it to be extreme, which it is, more so than I anticipated. In my own head, I'd mapped out that the self-harm was probably going to be like this woman's tipping point into seeking help. And I was expecting the mother cured of this eating disorder, but like the psychological treatment to be the torture, leaving her like Stepford wifey, soulless, robotic, so on and so forth. And like her actions being part of what was disturbing, but also like witnessing the treatment being part of what was disturbing. Let's go ahead and jump on the experience of this ride. All was going pretty much as planned. I liked the main character, Tyler. He was in a good, happy place with his life, gonna get married in about 3 months, seems to have a really sweet fiancée for the characterization level we get. Has a problematic relationship with his father, but it looks like they're at a point where they might be able to heal that or have more contact, and I'm happy for him. The fiancée encourages him to go see his mother before the end and try and get closure. I'm like, this is gonna be one of those stories that talks about how closure is overrated. And I'm down with that. If you need closure in your life, if you think that's the thing that's important, good for you. But I don't think that we should be pushing people into doing things for the sake of closure. I think the fact that they don't want to do it means they've already had that, even if it's not in a form that you recognize. And of course, we're rolling into a horror novel, so him being on the cusp of something good, of finally like having his life together and having a happy family unit means that something awful is about to happen to destroy that, and it's got me rooting for him and concerned for him from the jump. And most notably, when Tyler is talking about his childhood growing up and the intensity of his mother's eating disorder, I thought that this was like a mid-inflection point for readers that was showing us like what the scale of extreme horror would be in this story. And from there, I judged that the rest of this story was gonna be like the heavy end of mid, because what happens was gory and graphic and unexpected. But we didn't linger super hard on the gore or on like the pain or the suffering. For my money, I would have said that something like Manhunt is more extreme than where we are, because the blood and guts is traditionally splatterpunk, so it's like very heavily described, and also like the pain the person is feeling and how they're feeling that pain and like the minimal ability to mitigate that based off of the circumstances in Manhunt, like for me takes it to another level and brings it into heavy. Like I can stand to watch gore and to hear about gore if the people aren't in pain. Also, I don't find that description helpful if what you're trying to do is shock and give me a sense of extremity. Like the act itself should do that, and this book was delivering in that way. So far Disseverment is in like a pretty sweet spot spot where I'm thinking like, I'm gonna go sit and read the 62 pages in one go, which also in my mind made me question whether or not this was actually going to be an extreme horror as I understand extreme horror, but we'll get there when we get there, right? Because I'm on the ride now and I'm feeling in control. I feel like I know where we're going. I feel like I know what the level is. I'm ready just to have a good time. But we get at the halfway through point and things start to spiral. First, we learn that the new husband was actually the mother's therapist who quote-unquote cured her of her eating disability, and red flag central there. Nothing good comes from a situation where the therapist ends up becoming the love interest. But even though it's setting off alarm bells, this is actually keeping me on track for my prediction where like the therapy itself is the problem. So I'm still feeling comfortable, even in the way that Tyler has 100% dismissed, not even recognized this as a red flag on the play. Then this dude gives Tyler some booze to ease his nerves before he meets his mom. And again, as a woman, afraid of going places alone, afraid of taking things from strangers, I'm like, no, Tyler, don't do this. I was already a little bit up in arms about the fact that he doesn't take either his dad or his fiance with him to see his mom. When my husband, at that point in time fiance, was walking into an unknown situation with his family where one of his family members was sick, but we weren't sure how sick, I came with him. Because at the worst case scenario, I come with him, we find out that we had overblown what had happened, right? Then we feel silly, but I'm there. But if he had gone by himself and it had been like, I don't know, awful or whatever, and he needed support and I wasn't there, just like, why? So that makes me question a little bit about his and his fiance's relationship. And it also makes me question him a little bit, like, why did he want to go on this journey alone when he was clearly nervous enough to take this drink to calm his nerves? So far though, I am thinking like this is great storytelling from the author's point of view, because if they had made this character a woman and she had accepted this drink to calm her nerves, I'd have been out. But a man, sure, I'm still on the ride, although I am very concerned we're about to turn this ride in a direction I don't want to go on. We see the mother. And this was the first point where I started to feel some real terror and uncertainty about what was going on in Disseverment. They turn the wheelchair around and we find out that everything that could have been hacked off this woman has been hacked. I'm talking legs, arms, nose, lips, eyelids, ears, and this is just like a terrifying visage to think that a person might have willingly consented to this. And it's even more terrifying to think that maybe she didn't consent. And we have to ask, like, is this the man who did this to her? Did he find her after this happened? Is this his quote-unquote treatment? Is she cured because she hit that magic weight she wanted? Is she cured because through this extreme process she realized this wasn't a thing she wanted? We don't really know, and we're not going to get a chance to find out at this juncture because the mother has no way of emoting. She can't even keep her own eyeballs from drying out. And look, I'm not saying it's okay that these surgeries happened if the mom consented to it. Obviously, I don't think this level of mutilation is okay to do to any person for any reason. But there is, to me, an extra layer of horror if this happened, it wasn't an accident, and she didn't consent. And I think this speaks a little bit to like my own personal level of what I'm afraid of when it comes to body horror, because I'm not necessarily afraid of like losing a limb per se. Like if an accident happens and I lose the limb, I feel pretty confident that I could regain some semblance of a life that might not be the same as it was before, but could be something that I would personally be happy with and could still be functioning pretty well in the world around me. And generally, like when I see other people who have had accidents or who were born without a limb or who were born a certain way, you know, I tend to think that they have some kind of good quality of life. It's different than mine, but that they are off in their world being happy. And, you know, that's just how I feel about people with different abilities and, you know, who have had different life situations that have come to that. What I am really and truly and deeply terrified of is pain. The accident where I lose my arm, the aftermath of living without an arm, not so scary. The pain and terror of the moment where I'm losing the arm, and also probably like the lingering pain, the fear of infection or complications while recovering, all really kind of scare me. The idea that it wouldn't be an accident, but that someone would intentionally do that to me is also really scary to me. So seeing seeing the mom in this situation and realizing that these gambits of things that are really utterly terrifying to me and not knowing, like a huge shock to my system. But lucky day for me, this finally wakes Tyler, our main character, up, and he realizes he needs to get the hell out of here and regroup later. But that's when we find out there was something in his drink and he passes out. So he's trapped in this situation. And I had like a full body rejection of where this plot was now suddenly going, and like put my book down and went for a nervous, panicked walk. There was like part of me that wanted to bleach my brain or burn this memory out and just pretend I hadn't read any of this and none of this had ever happened. Because I had come in prepared for bad things to have happened to the mom and to continue to be happening to the mom, but I hadn't come in prepared for necessarily this level of limb loss, and for now that to be a real and true possibility to be happening to poor Tyler. Because if this thing happens to Tyler, he is fairly mentally healthy, he's in a pretty good spot in his life, and we know that he does not want this. So like, here we are at my biggest fear, not so much the loss of the limb, but someone taking it against my will. Oh no. But I couldn't unread what I had read, and my mind kept circling back to it. Like, the uncertainty of not being sure what happens to Tyler, the ever-optimistic part of my brain being like, maybe he just wants to tie Tyler up and then force him to witness terrible things happening to his mom. Which sounds crazy when I say it out loud. That option feels like a better option than this guy is about to do hack surgery on poor Tyler. Or maybe our character manages to escape before any extra harm happens to him or his mom. I don't know, but like at this point, for some reason, I was still sort of kind of believing the stepfather, which meant that I thought, okay, so he's a dude who does terrible things, but he is doing it to people who are mentally off. This woman had an eating disorder, he thought he was curing her eating disorder. Or this woman had an eating disorder and he thought he was giving her like a taste of her own medicine by like shocking her out of what she really wanted and bringing her back to reality, and then like taking sick pleasure in like giving her what she wants when she realizes that's not what she wants. This is a whole working premise I have for what this man is doing. And none of that MO fits Tyler. Potentially, Tyler is safe. And at this point in time, I'm actually back at my computer looking for spoilers for Disseverment. But this is a really tiny book that not a lot of people have read, and I couldn't find anything that kind of like told me what was going to happen before it happened. To a certain degree, I really wanted to know because this was a different ride than I had expected to get on. But I was also like midway downhill on it, and I couldn't exactly eject off of it and just pretend I'd never seen it either. That's not how my mind works. I took a big breath and I said, all right, I'm coming back in. I'm here to the end at this point. We wake up, Tyler is groggy, but he's not in any immediate pain, so I have lots of hope still. It's very short-lived because the psycho comes into the room, lets Tyler know it's been 3 days, and then like encourages Tyler to look down, and that's when Tyler realizes he has no legs and one of his arms is missing. I guess this killer was able to take a limb a day that Tyler's been under, and they're giving him a brief break for blood / to have this conversation while he still has the one good arm. I don't know. So yep, a couple paragraphs in, put the book down immediately because something that is my worst ever fear has happened to poor Tyler, and I really liked poor Tyler. I take a couple deep breaths. I say to myself, well, we're not describing pain, and Tyler's too drugged to be afraid, so I think I can keep going. But I do sort of feel like my soul has left its body at this point, and like a sick fascination to know is driving me forward, hoping to get that cathartic resolution. But I almost feel like divorced from the person who's reading this book. Like I've just been so horrified and traumatized by what's going on at this juncture. You know, it feels a lot like that moment in Tusk when the dude wakes up and realizes he's missing a leg and is still like trapped in that old man's house. Except that dude was an asshole and I never cared about him. And I went into Tusk knowing it was about a man being forcibly transformed into a walrus. I have not gone into Disseverment knowing this is how this is going to play out. They said Tyler was going to have to make a decision and that was going to change the course of the way things are going. What decision has Tyler made that's left him with one limb? The shock hasn't worn off for me or for Tyler when this psycho goes and gets his mom, drags her down, assaults her, and wowee, had my world gotten small at this juncture. It was just me and Tyler. I didn't really process until I was going back through to write this review what happened in this scene. But his mom is still somewhere in there, even though so much of her has been hacked off. We come to find out even her tongue, so she can't speak. But she is fighting this man. She's struggling against him. She's showing that she hates and despises him and doesn't want what's going on. Both what's going on now in this moment and what has been going on while he's been hacking her up. Here, reflecting on it, this is a horrifying, terrible moment. But while I was reading it the first time through, I was just like, yeah, this is happening. Yeah, it's the worst case scenario. Of course it is. Tyler's sitting here with one arm. How could this not be just the worst, most terrible thing? And then the psycho decides to wax on poetically and philosophically for a moment about what makes a human being, and how he's basically cutting off all these parts and asking if that's made people less human or more human, and he's sort of implying that he's helping them find out what it takes to be human, and in some way, shape, or form removing distractions to make them more human. Which, honestly, what makes people human is an infuriating question because there's no good answer to it, especially when you're already sort of muddled from drugs as Tyler is and in intense shock. And even though I don't want to engage with this question, I think it's dumb as shit, and that this man is just a psycho who doesn't know what he's talking about and being an extreme dude and justifying it by pretending he's philosophical, I am shouting at Tyler to keep this man talking and hoping that if you can just keep talking to him long enough, something else will happen and you'll be able to get out of here with your arm. But at the same time, I have no idea what Tyler could say because what does it matter what makes someone human? What would knowing that information unlock for anyone? But also, I would argue that the physicality of the human body and your senses is part of what makes someone quintessentially human. I'm not saying it's the most important part, but the tactile, sensory elements is part of the human experience. You don't need all of those senses, you don't need a full range of motion, but something in the physical body, the physical plane, is part of the human experience. And if you don't have that, you're just a mind in a jar, that's not necessarily a human experience anymore. So to me, hacking all these body parts off immediately is reducing the human experience. And if your goal is to get rid of all sensory input, you are reducing someone down to a mind, and they still have sentience and are still valuable and worth talking to, worth knowing, etc., etc. But I don't know that a experience without any bodily input at all is human. And then, while we're still recovering from all of this bullshit and trying to figure out how we're going to keep this man talking to keep him from hurting Tyler, we find out that Tyler and his mom are not the first people he's done this to, and he's got 13 buckets down in this grimy basement, and in each one of these buckets is someone who's completed this process, and that's going to include knocking their teeth out and taking their eyes out, which Tyler's mom still has at this juncture. And then I guess he just leaves them in these buckets in their own waste, I don't know, to experience this special whatever that being fully human is. The psycho is definitely a man who overly romanticized the sensory deprivation tank and decided he wanted to take it to a new extreme. Which, FYI, since you still have a torso that feels or whatever, if you're being left in your own waste, I believe that would be an unpleasant sensation and might be distracting if it's the only sensation you have. So I don't think he's achieving that goal on a technical level either. But we're here sitting in the reality of what the end game is, that hopelessness that it's going to happen first to Tyler's mom and then to Tyler. Or perhaps this guy plans to do it to Tyler, make this woman watch because he seems to be enjoying torturing her on a whole host of levels, and then complete the process for her, knowing that she's doomed her son. But that's when cop father comes in and breaks things up, and the psycho flees. The dad, after checking on Tyler and Tyler insisting that he's fine and dad needs to track down psycho, goes after him, and Tyler gets his choice where he manages to crawl over to his mom, ask if she wants to keep living. She doesn't, so he strangles her to death, and at that point he assumes that none of the people in any of these buckets want to keep living since they can't can't communicate with anyone, and they have so much of their senses deprived, he just doesn't feel like they're normal for them, and he finds a way to set the house on fire. And Tyler might have died in that moment, but Dad comes back just in time to rescue him, and only him. We are 75% of the way through. If the book stopped here, this is a 5-star horror masterpiece for me. But we do have to roll over into the ending at this juncture, and I didn't like this ending. It was weird, a little awkward, uncomfortable, perhaps a bit rushed. You know, honestly, at first I felt like things might be okay. This like just might be an extreme horror with like a happy ending. And I like Tyler, so I'm down for a happy ending for this poor man. He gets to do physical therapy and just like regular therapy, and he seems to come to like a new normal, new sort of peace. And as I already told you guys, I feel like you could come to some sort of new happy even after an accident. And I'm glad to see that Tyler's achieving it, especially because he says it happens over like the course of 2 years. And to me, that feels like enough time has passed from the original trauma that maybe he's coming into this at this point. He and his fiancée stay together. They put off their marriage though until Tyler is like in a more healthy place, and also until their relationship can recalibrate so that like they know each other in this new way they're gonna have to have a relationship. Part of me is like, oh, that's sweet. I didn't think that his fiance could roll this way, because she is a personal trainer who owns a gym, and at this point owns like a couple franchises of gyms, which says to me that she is very clearly in her own body, in her physicality and physical experience, and Tyler has like been suddenly removed from his ability to do that, and I thought like she was just not gonna be able to like relate to him. And then we start to get into like Tyler's psyche. He like compares his mom's eating disorder to his own personal anxiety before he went through this incident, and like he says like, you know, the anxiety made him feel heavy in his body, and now that he doesn't have that anxiety he feels so light, and he sort of like attributes it to the loss of his limbs. But you know what, I think that's bullshit. I think Tyler could have gone and seen a therapist at any time. They could have worked on his anxiety, and he could have had this lightness and been fully able-bodied. But it's the first indication to me that Tyler's mentality has changed, and that he's gonna go from being that sweet nice boy I saw at the beginning into the new psycho. You know, he continues this process of transformation, sort of like confirming that the psycho's philosophical things were true. He agrees with them, and he kind of like wants to continue that transformation and process for himself and like give that to other people. There's a random interjection of like his dad chasing down the killer that means nothing to me. The only thing it does is it stops his dad's weekly visits. It means he gets a chance to confront his wife about the surprise cheating that's been going on. The fact that the man got a sensory deprivation tank, the fact that his father and wife let him spend so much time in that tank that like he's now sensitive to lights being turned on and off. I don't know why they didn't intervene or think something was wrong with that. The fact that this woman is like cheating on him when she knows he's been through this trauma, that feels really wrong. But then like the ending they come to that involves like mutilation of her that the two of them do together and is probably going to result in her bleeding out and dying also felt like very abrupt and random. And I think there are several issues with this ending. First of all, we go from the end of this incident and the deeply traumatic moment and we flip a page and it's been 2 years. This is the first time we are not on the journey with Tyler anymore, and we have to sort of like jump ship and like recalibrate. So that puts me like back into my own body, back into my own self and my own prejudices, and I think the psycho is a psycho. I think his theory is crazy. I thought it was bullshit even when I was like a little spaced out and unable to fully articulate it. But if you give me all this time and this calmness and stuff, then I definitely can't go on the ride with Tyler where he starts to believe the psycho and become the psycho himself. Another issue for me is like the girlfriend staying with him, marrying him, and then cheating on him. You either separate or you work it out and get married, but like this half step she did doesn't make any sense to me. The sensory deprivation tank, that process doesn't work for me either. And then the ending is almost like dreamlike and so removed from anything that could medically be possible that it makes it unclear to me whether or not this is really happening or some kind of dream, imagining, I don't know, like asphyxiation while he dies in the fire or whatever. you know, like he didn't actually get saved by his dad. The ending just struck me as weird and off-putting, and like it took a good thing and ruined it. But let's move into some conclusions. I do think this book earns its extreme horror badge in sheer brutality alone. I'm back and forth on the psychological element because certainly psychologically something was happening to me when we were in it with Tyler. And I think it really terrorized me and scared me and subverted my expectations in ways that made it a truly amazing ride and like a lot of fun after I was done reading it. Where we twist that psychological element into Tyler like agreeing with the psycho is where it personally lost me. I guess I can see where they were striving for like that twisting and warping in Tyler from this guy that I kind of liked into believing the psycho, an element that you can't recover from something like this, or that you recover in such a warped way that now you're agreeing with this guy and want to like continue his legacy. I guess there's something to that. There's like a symmetry or a chilling element. Maybe if we had had more time, this had been a longer story and we could have like executed it. It seemed like this slow degradation. I could have gone there. Or, you know, like this is a debut novel for this author and perhaps when he's more skilled, I'd be more into it. Certainly Edgar Allan Poe does short stories and he does great like descents into madness, stuff that stands up today. And I sort of feel like to a certain degree this author was kind of trying to do something similar and this is just like his first work and he wasn't able to fully execute. At the same time, there were some things that made this story like tolerable in a way that it couldn't have been if it had gotten like more graphic. Even though Tyler lost all his limbs, he wasn't ever in any pain. And if we had like started to describe pain or if we had been with him on a recovery where there had been a lot of pain, I just think I would have had to nope out of that. Secondly, he doesn't do gore. The shock of losing the limbs or the shock of seeing this like extent of surgery on the mother is enough. Because a lot of times like I read extreme horror where they're doing like eye stuff and you know there's eyeball jelly and all this other stuff. It gets to a level where you can't do anything but laugh. It's gone way over the shark. And I think lastly, Disseverment is trying to say something and it's trying to say a couple of different things and hitting on a couple of themes and elements that feel like relatable and real. The violence isn't without purpose. And that helps me a lot too because I am not in extreme horror for gore just for gore's sake. But even as it doesn't shy away from these terrible things, it does not rely on shock and gore to keep the story moving, and I really like that. This is the only book by Z.C. Kroll at this point in time, and part of me likes that and wants to keep it that way because it's written as if Tyler were the one chronicling his own journey, and I sort of like the idea that Tyler only has this one story in him and this is the only installment we get. But on the other side, I really want more from him because this was a fantastic debut and I'd like to read more from this author. Overall, this is by far the scariest thing I've read in years, and I loved that journey all the way to the 75% mark so much that I'm gonna overlook a problematic, troubling, not slightly disjointed ending for it to have those 4-star review. If you got this far into the video, I want to thank you for coming on this journey with me. I know this was like a little bit of a different kind of video than what I usually do, but I just really wanted to lay it all out and talk about it for a minute with someone, anyone. If you have read this book or read something similar to this, recommend it to me in the comments down below because I would really like to read something else like Disseverment. If you got this far into the video, you have nothing else to say, leave me a hand emoji in the comments down below. And as always, keep reading.